All right, welcome back. We are COMP1115. That's Game Programming 1 in the fall 2025 semester at Georgian, and it's week 9, part 2 of our broadcast and recording together. All right, so what I wanted to talk about next. So last we left off, we were kind of talking about different kinds of method modifiers. We got to method overloading, and we also talked about default parameters, and then we're getting into the list collection. That's the next thing I want to talk about. But in code, what we did was we recreated our user interface in some crafty ways, right? And moved it around and put it inside of a new thing, a new control called a panel, all right? And that's what we kind of did there. And this is part of your in-class exercise 8. So we started this off. We're going to come back to this in a bit. Back to this, the list collection. I want to talk about some new constructs again. So some things that were very helpful. One thing is we've been talking about arrays from last time when we were together. And we've been talking about that for a while. And arrays seem to be like the pain in the ass for everybody. People don't understand how they work properly 100%, or they have some issues getting data from them and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of like the way it works, right? So here's an example of an array called scores. We declared it as an array with 3 spaces. Space 0, scores 0. 0 is the index. We can assign a value to that space or that memory location, right? That's what we do. 10, 20, and 30 for locations 0, 1, and 2 respectively in the array. Or we can also call this element 0, 1, and 2. That's what we're doing here. These are indices, if you will. And then we can use a for each loop, and we have the following structure for the for each loop. The way I read this is like this. For each score in scores, or for every score in scores, scores is the array, score would be each element. For every element inside the scores array is what I'm saying. Write line or output to the console that element. That's what this is. This is an example of that. So this is the thing. So a couple of things about arrays that we know. We know that size is fixed at creation. We can't change the size after we've initialized it. Okay, we can't make this 5 after we make it 3. We can't do that. Okay, if we do make it a new int array of 5, we destroy all the data from the previous array. Elements are accessed by an index, zero-based indexing, and fast access due to being sequentially stored because we're using things in contiguous memory. Enter the list collection, which is pretty cool. It's a collection similar to arrays. Arrays is also a collection of elements, right, of similar types. A list is something like that as well, but I want you to think about a list as a managed array, okay? So it's managed in more ways than you might like. Maybe even you might even like it way, way more. I like it more in many ways for ease of use than an array, okay? Positives about a list, super easy to use. We can dynamically resize the list. We can add elements and remove elements from a list as much as we want. That's a good thing. Lists can be lists of anything, just like arrays can be arrays of anything, and I mean anything. For example, okay, and this is where I digressed a little bit, and this is where you have to watch a bit. I'm going to bring up my Unity, all right, for a second. So here I've got Unity 6 as an example, and I want to make a new project. Let's do this, make a new project. You don't have to do this, it's just a watch me kind of thing. So let's call this project name ICE 8 Demo, right, for Unity. And I'm going to create this project. It's going to take some time. So there's Unity Engine. So when I create my project, yes, I'll put the video up later today. All right. When I make my project in Unity, and if I have an array, I can make it an array of game objects too. I don't have to just make it an array of integers, right, or whatever. I can make it an array of whatever I want, right? So that's the thing that works in Unity, and it's the same thing if I use a list. The power of a list is that we can add items to the list, to the collection, whereas an array, the items are fixed. You know what they are at the beginning. only X number of locations I'm going to allocate, okay? I'm going to allocate 10 locations, 10 memory locations. I'm going to allocate 50, right? Whereas a list, I don't need a capacity. I could add one if I want, but I don't need a capacity. Instead, I could add in as many kind of like memory locations as I need. So dynamically resizes, it maintains type safety, it provides many built-in methods, and it internally in the back end uses an array and does all that funky lifting, the heavy lifting for you, okay? So there's some properties that you should know about lists. One of them is the count property, where you can say how many objects have been added to the list, how many things. And then there are some great methods. I can add an item, I can remove an item, I can remove an item at a location, I can insert an item, I can clear the entire list. I can check to see if the list contains an item. It'll tell me where. And as well as sort the list in alphabetical order. Here's an example of an inventory list. Let's say I'm gonna have my character in the future, and I want to create an inventory system for the character. I can make a new list of strings for now. So they're not actually holding real inventory, just a list of things. And the list, notice the list is the keyword. In angle brackets, that tells us, we've seen this before, this tells me the type, what the type is of the list. So the list is going to hold strings, that's what it is, okay? And the name of the list is inventory. I can use this syntax for creating the list. I want to make a new list of type string. That's what this means, okay? And then once I've created the list, so there's the list creation step. This is the point where I'm creating the list. And then I'm going to add things to the list one at a time. I could do it one at a time. I could do initialization just like I did with arrays. But I can do it like this, inventory.add and whatever I want to add. Inventory.add and whatever else I want to add. And then I can do an inventory count, which will return 3. Kind of cool. So kind of a different way of adding things to a list. And a lot of times I find that, or I feel anyway, that lists are a little bit more natural, right, than what we've seen before. All right, so we've got a 3D game here. Doesn't really matter, okay? So the reason why I wanted to bring up Unity for a second is I want to give you this example from a Unity perspective as well. So here in Unity, I'm just going to rename this scene as main, okay? Doesn't matter if it's 3D or 2D, by the way. The camera that I have here right now is a perspective camera, and I can easily make that an orthographic camera to look at. You know, I can switch from, 3D to 2D. You know, as an example, here's 2D, right? I can do a lot of stuff in Unity to make it look like what I want. Also, from a camera perspective, you can change a lot of stuff in Unity to make it look the way it is, right? 2D, I know. In fact, you know what I'll do is instead of me fooling around with this, I accidentally pulled off the wrong, kind of project type. Let's make a new one. Let's kill this one. Just 1 second. I'm going to show this one in Explorer, and let's get rid of this one. Right? And let me just make another one while I'm waiting, while I'm exploring, and then I'll talk about it with you. Let's remove from list, and we'll make a new project. This time I'll choose actually 2D as opposed to 3D, and we'll call it the same thing. We'll say this is like ICE 8 demo. How about that? ICE 8 demo. All right, there we go. 2D project this time, okay? Not a 3D project. I'll let that thing do its thing. All right, and it'll take a second for me to do that again. But back to this. So, so this is the first part. The second part is how do I loop over a list, right? So one way of looping over a list is using a for loop, just like we do with arrays. So again, if this is the inventory list, it says inventory, then I can just simply loop over the list with a for loop and using the same construct and index. So a list acts like an array as well. So that's pretty cool. So again, I got lists and I got arrays, and you know what? They're in many ways accessing a list is the same as an array, right? I can also use a for each loop to step through the list for every item in inventory as an example. This is more contextual, right? I can do both ways. And in general, what I wrote here is for each is simpler for reading. So this is where I want to read stuff, while for is better if you need the index or to modify elements. Okay, so this is kind of what I want to do. I know I froze because I'm trying to do multiple things with Unity and stuff like that, and broadcast on YouTube and be on Zoom and a bunch of other stuff. All right, so here's your, let's continue with the full inventory example here, okay? So you can see here that I declare a list at the top. I'm just going to go through this again. So just to kind of step through the code with you a little bit. And it's good to read code because it gives you, kind of experience on doing so. So first I create the list. This is the first part. Then I add items to the list. Okay, I have this new method called display inventory. That's this up here. And what I'm doing is I can pass a reference to the inventory object because list is a reference type. It's not a simple variable. It's not a primitive type. It's not a float or int or bool, right? Those are primitive types, and those always get passed as a value. They get copied. But a list is actually a reference type. So what I'm doing is I'm passing it by reference for the objects, but I'm passing it by value for the list itself. So the list doesn't get, it gets copied. That's what happens. And it gets copied into this. All right, that's what happens. So this list here is got everything from this list, but they're not the same exact thing, okay? So they're copied. But I can still see everything. All the values inside of that, inside of this list are the same values that are in this list, okay? That's what's happened here. So I don't have to do that manual copying across. So when I do a display inventory, I say if my list count is 0, then inventory is empty. Right here, my inventory list is not 0 because I have 3 objects I've added to the list. And then I say for each item in the list, then just write out dash item. That's what it does, right? So, so it says console write line after add, I have sword, potion, and shield. That's what I have. And that's what this will do. Next, let's keep going. I want to insert an item at a specific position. How do I do that? Inventory insert at position 1, right? And then I want to insert a bow. So position 1, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2. So what happens to potion? It gets bumped to position 2. That's what happens. So dynamically, what happens is a list expands and contracts as I add things and remove things. I think we're up with Unity now. There it is. Okay, there's my Unity project. And let's go back to this idea. And the reason why I want to bring this up, I want to show you that lists can be not just used for what we have them for, but for other things. Okay, so I want to make in Unity, right, in the game itself, I want to make a sprite. And it's going to be basically just a circle, all right? So bear with me with a simple example. So here I want to make a 2D object. I'll make it call a sprite, make it a circle. And the circle will be called a bullet. There's the bullet. Right now, the circle, if you notice, is, I'll just change the size of my gizmos because my gizmos are pretty big, so I'll make it so they're really small. There we go. So you can see the circle is white in color, right? That's what the bullet is. And just to make it different, let's make the circle red in color. So we know it's me that's doing it, right? And I can do that by just simply changing the color object, right? It's a simple draw mode for the sprite, and that's all it is. It's called bullet, but it has no behavior, okay? That's what the bullet does. Remember in Unity, when I want to add, if I was going to change, notice you may not have this set up here like this for yourself in Unity. You might be set up differently. Bear with me because I do things my way in Unity. And you'll see Wallace do his things in Unity next semester as well. What I want to do here is I want to make this into a prefab. So I need a couple of folders to do this. One thing is I don't like my scenes folder like this. What I do if I want my scenes folder to be on the top for Unity is I kind of use square brackets like this. Square brackets forces the folder to be at the top no matter what. So scenes, and the other thing I like to do in square brackets is I also like to create a folder called scripts. And this is where I keep my C# scripts in Unity up here. All right, so scenes and scripts, okay? Inside of scripts, I want to make a new C# script. So I'm going to kind of create a new, so just hard to see because of where it is. So I want to create a new C# script, okay? So if you look at scripting, right, then you can see that here is a mono behavior script. There's other options that you have here as well. Now this is Unity 6. I'm not sure if you guys are using Unity 6 or using Unity 2022. Unity 6 is fine. So here's a mono behavior script. I want to rename this, thank you. I want to rename this to bullet controller. Here's my bullet controller. So bullet controller is the name of my C# script. That's what I've made, okay? And I want to attach it to my bullet. So here's my bullet, and the easiest way to attach it once I have my script and my object here is just drag and drop it and stop on top of this add component. So I would just do something like this, right? And so now bullet controller is actually a script that is acting as a component on top of bullet, all right? Let's double click on the bullet controller. It'll bring up Visual Studio. Again, another instance of Visual Studio for me. Remember, in Unity, what you have is something similar that we've seen in other places. Now, I can't do this in the lab. Otherwise, guys, I'd be doing Unity for the second half of the semester instead of Windows Forms. All right, but it's kind of similar in terms of what we have. We have a class, which is a container. We have two methods, a start method and an update method. The start method triggers, and by the way, I don't like this boilerplate comment stuff, so I just get rid of it, right? Because you don't need it once you know what it is. And the same thing goes with this boilerplate comment, right? So here's my bullet controller, and what I want to do with the bullet controller is when it starts, I want it to, I don't know, go towards the right, right? So for me to make it go towards the right, there's many ways to do that. I could update its position by repositioning this thing over and over again. I'm not going to give it a rigid body right now, just to make this simple thing what it is, right? So, so I know that I have a transform component, and I want to change its position. So transform position, and what I want to do is I want to equal to, this is not bad, which is basically it's going to take the forward direction, and the forward direction is where it's going to go, and it's going to use time.delta time to scale how fast this thing goes, and it's going to move by, this is way too fast, let's make it 2 units, so make it really small, right? 2.0. All right, and if I just did this, and if I go back and I saved, and I go back to Unity, and if I just have my bullet, let's see what happens to the bullet, right, really quickly. So if I press play in Unity, then it's going to hopefully move the bullet around, right? And if not, we'll see what happens, right? So here is the bullet not moving, okay? But it didn't error either, which is pretty cool. So that's the bullet controller. And it basically says transform positions, transform forward times time.delta time. And maybe this is too slow. Let's put it at 20 and try it again. And by the way, these are in the update function. Let's see what happens now. So again, I'm just running this thing and seeing if it can move, because it might move a little bit slower, or it may not move at all. So first things first, let's make this thing move, all right? So transform component, transform plus equal to transform forward, multiply by, that's probably too slow. It's probably not even seeing anything at all. So transform forward, let's just do a new vector instead. We'll see a new vector 3, and we'll add in, across the, and we'll multiply by delta time, because that is on the Z direction. That's what it is. That's why you can't see it. And again, one thing to note from a coordinate system perspective is this is X and Y, and Z is in the screen, okay, at this point, right? So we don't want to do this because this is X, Y, and Z. So Z will be 0. We don't want to do that. But we do want to add in 1 on the X axis, right? That'll be kind of towards the right. And if we did just 1 by itself, like 1, not scaled by anything, let's see what happens to the transform position. This happens every update for the bullet controller. And let's see if we are good now. Right? Yes. Okay, so it's just way too fast. So now we can scale it by time.delta time times time.delta time times 10. That's good. And let's do that again. And again, all I want to do is make the bullet move to the right. Okay, that's all I'm trying to do here. So there we go. And we're going to see a bullet move nicely. There you go. A bullet move to the right. Yay. Very exciting. okay? What I want to do instead now is I want to make this bullet into a prefab. So I need a prefabs folder. So I'm just going to go here and add a folder called prefabs. And in this prefabs folder, I'm going to take my bullet from my hierarchy and drag and drop it in there. There we go. So now I have a bullet. It's a prefab. And I can make as many bullets as I want. So instead of me having my bullet in my scene, I want to have something that generates bullets, right? So let's make a new empty object. We'll call this game controller, right? And the game controller object itself is going to hold a script to make the bullet function. So what I'm going to do is in my scripts folder, make a brand new C# script. There it is. A brand new C# script. We'll call this game controller. And what I'll do is I'll take the game controller object and I'll connect the C# script up to it. Now this is the stuff that you guys should already know how to do in Unity. If you don't know how to do this in Unity, I'm sorry, just a demo. All right. So here I am back in Visual Studio, and I have some boilerplate code I want to remove because I don't like the boilerplate code or comments. There we go. And what I want to do now is I want to open up a public variable of type bullet, right? My bullet controller, and I want to call it bullet prefab, right? That's what it is, bullet prefab. And what I want to do here is once I've set up that bullet prefab in my game controller, I want to be able to drag and drop my, notice that there is a space now in the editor, right? In Unity editor for the bullet prefab, and that's going to come out of the bullet of the prefabs folder. So I can just drag and drop that in here, and now I have a reference to the bullet, right? So that's what this does. And what this is doing, if you think about it, is giving me an object I can work with. Okay, now back to the list thing I did, right? So I want to make a new list of bullets. I want to call it a bullet list, all right? So we're going to call this the bullet list. So public, this is how you do it, right? List of type bullet controller, right? There it is. And we'll call this bullets, okay, just like this, bullets. And it says I need to add in systems collection. Sure it is, I can do that. When I do this public list of type bullets, right, in Unity, what do I see is you're going to see another inside of my editor here again, you can see that the list is empty. Bullets, there's no bullets in the list. Okay, here we are. So what I can do is in my start function, which triggers one time when the object is instantiated and put into Unity for the first time, I can configure my bullets list. I want to add in 50 bullets. So how do I do this? I can make for loop, right? And we'll just call this count, as an example, and I want to count up to 50, right, from 0 to 49, right? And what I want to do, it's suggesting stuff, but what I want to say is I want my my bullets, and I want to add a new bullet. That's what I want to do. I want to instantiate a new bullet, right, of type, so bullet controller, so bullet prefab. That's what I want to do, right? And what this bullet prefab does is the instantiate method has 12 overloads. We just talked about overloads today. So here's an example where the the instantiate method has 12 of them, 12 different ways of adding bullets, okay, or adding objects to the scene, okay? So here I've got my bullet controller, my bullet prefab. That's what I'm adding in here. And what if I just did this? Okay, well, if I was to save this, go back to Unity, and if I was to start the game controller is going to trigger my game controller script, which should load us up with a bunch of bullets. Let's see what happens. So if I do that, right, see a bunch of bullets, they all moved at the same time, right? And there's now 50 bullets, there they are, and they're part of that list. Are you with me in terms of how this works? Any questions so far? This is just a demo. Okay, I don't need you guys to do this, but it kind of talks about how lists work, right? Compared to if I was to do this with arrays, okay? So the list is dynamic. This is the idea behind this. This list that we just made is a dynamic list. Now I can disable the bullet. as an example, I can kind of say something like, well, I don't want it to move, right? And the way to do this would be to have another little function in the bullet. So let's do that. So if I go back to, I can make a void move function, and the void move function will do all this, right? And I can also say if the bullet is enabled or disabled, so I can enable or disable the bullet, right? By doing this. So I'm triggering the move function every single time I move. And I like to do that because I don't want to clutter the update with a bunch of stuff like this. I'd rather do it different ways. So what I can say is when I instantiate a bullet, instead of doing it all in one line, let's make it a new bullet. So I can say var bullet is equal to instantiate this. So this actually returns an object of type bullet. That's what it does, and saves it here. You can see it's a bullet controller type, right? And then here, I want to put in the bullet that I'm using. If I do it this way, instead of doing it all in one line, I have control over my bullet. So for each bullet now, I can say something like bullet dot, again, if I want to enabled, I can say that's equal to false. So I can disable the bullet, right? When I create it, it's not enabled, as an example. And this way it won't fire immediately when I add all these to my pool, right? So if I because that's what I'm really doing. I'm creating a bullet pool. And that's like, instead of calling it bullets, let's just rename this thing. So I can refactor, rename this in Unity as well to something like bullet pool, right? There we go, bullet pool, save. And then if I go back to, go back to Unity, there we go. If I go back to Unity, now I have a bullet pool that's empty, but when I press play, right, I have 50 of these bullets that are instantiated, but they're not moving, okay? And notice that they all say bullet clone, okay, because they're just instantiated bullets. The other thing I don't want to do is when I'm in Unity, if I'm going to do this for real, right, then what I want to do is I want to make the bullet appear in some odd location. So instead of the bullet being here, I can actually say that the bullet dot position, so transform dot position, I can say that that's equal to a new vector 3, and let's put it like way off screen. So something like, I don't know, negative 5,000, well, 5,000, not 50,000, and then negative 5,000. It's in the game. These bullets are all in the game, but they're sitting somewhere way off screen. You can't see it. So if I did this now, and I go back, you're not going to see the bullet here anymore, right? There we go. So if I press play now, no more bullets on the screen. You're not going to see it anymore, right? No bullets. But they're still here. They're actually in the game, right? But they're not in the scene, which is pretty cool. So this is an example of me using a list of bullets, right? Because again, it could be anything here. Instead of, we've been doing these examples of other things. We've been using integers, strings, and a bunch of other stuff. But you can make it a list of anything. By the way, you can change this behavior. Instead of making it a list of type bullet, we can also make it an array. So if I said public, and then I want to make it a bullet controller array, it'd be the same thing. So I'll say bullet controller array, right, which we call active bullets. Sure, we make that. If I was to do this, so I have a list and an array, does the array show up in the editor as well? If I save it and go back to Unity, you see the bullet pool is empty, and here's active bullets, and also you can see active bullets here as an array of bullets inside of the editor. So you can do it both ways. And for example, if I trigger a bullet on update, what I can do is I can get a bullet from the pool, and then I can put it inside of the scene at a certain location, right? So let's say, for example, I want to get a bullet. So every update, I want to say, hey, bullet pool, I want to remove a bullet from the pool. Here's a remove bullet from the pool. And this removal, right, notice, if I hover over, it returns the remove, right, from the pool, right? What it does is it returns if it's been removed or not. Okay, that's what it does. So I kind of want to get the first bullet. So if I do something like bullet pool 0, right, that gives me the first object, the first bullet in the pool, the bullet in the front as an example, right? And if I take this bullet and reposition it, right, on update, as an example. That's okay, but I want to be able to get that bullet somehow, right? So there's different things we can do. We can say that bullet pool dot remove at. Remove at gives me the index that I want to remove at, so 0. And if I hover at remove at, again, what doesn't return the bullet, doesn't actually return that bullet back, to this location, just literally removes it, pops it out, okay, as an example. So that's what the remove at method does for the list. Let's see what other methods are at the list as well, right? So I want to, I can copy, I contain, I can do a bunch of stuff here with the list itself, right? And I can pop it out at different places. I don't want to just update this, kind of on update. Update fires really, really quickly. It's going to happen every frame, right? So I want to be able to do this a lot slower. So where I actually trigger a bullet to fire, much at a much longer rate. And I want to kind of grab a bullet from the pool that I've pre-instantiated here, reposition it where I want it to go. So I want to put it back to where it's going to be, like in the middle of the scene. So I don't have to necessarily use update for this. I can say that I make my bullet, and then what I want to do is for each bullet, so for each, and I can say var bullet in bullet pool, right? I can do it this way. I want to take this bullet and I want to, the transform dot position, I want to put it in the middle of the screen, kind of thing. So I want to say the bullet position is equal to a new vector3 object. There we go. And let's put it at 0, 0. Okay. So that's going to put it in the middle of the screen here. And then when I do this, it's just going to position it there. But I also need to activate the bullet. So I can say something like bullet dot enabled is equal to true. Okay. So this is going to enable the bullet, and it's going to happen for each bullet. Now this is going to happen pretty quick, as fast as I can get it. All right. Which means that you're going to see a stream of bullets come out all at the same time, like a fire hose. Let's see how this happens. Right. Again, we're just building this up one step at a time. So if I go back to Unity, then if I press play, then you're going to see is I've added to them. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking each of these bullets and then, kind of they're all together. They're clumped all together as they're moving, because that's how fast I got them all. And you can see where they are. Each of them is moving, right? And they're all kind of moving together at the same time. Because for each bullet, I've kind of done this. But I can stagger this for each loop. This is kind of like adding a bullet to the scene is what I'm doing, because I'm going for each bullet. I'm kind of going through there, right? I can also do, instead of, bullet position, I can look at bullet pool and I can call it in. And you can also use a coroutine for this or whatever. But the idea here is that you can call each of the bullets in the pool and put them back inside of the scene as you like. My little demo for lists. Lists are very beautiful in terms of what you can do. You can insert, you can remove, you can sort items, you can clear items, you can look at them as arrays. There's many ways of using lists. Okay, and hopefully that little Unity demo helped you understand that it can be of any type, which is really what I wanted you to understand from that. Okay. Lots of ways to construct a list. We've seen this before, where we can do this as the old constructor syntax that we used before. We can certainly construct a list like this, where we kind of have a list of things we want to put together, right? And we can also use a collection expression, which is what we've done before in the past with, as an example, what we've seen with arrays. So this is kind of a collection expression you can use. You can also give a list a capacity. So you can say like the maximum number of items on the list is 100. I never want more than 100 items, right? And you can also combine an array in the list by making first, let's say, an array, and then you can use something called the spread operator, which is kind of cool. And what it'll do is it'll take this array and copy it in the position of where I put the spread operator in the list, which is kind of cool. So you can actually combine arrays and lists together. So lists are super useful. And I'm sure in your game development career, you're going to use a list or some kind of construct like it, as you move forward. All right. So that's why I wanted to talk about these things. All right, back to in-class exercise 8. That was kind of like just as an aside for getting us to work with Unity and that kind of stuff. So I have this. so far, and I want to add other things to it. I want to make this more realistic. Instead of generating randomly a number, that kind of stuff, let's change this thing. Let's rename this button generate to something else. I want to change this button generate to button random. There's button random, okay? And I want to make it say something like random. So it'll say random on it as well. Let's change the, so the random button is what this is at the end, right? Here's my random button. And this will generate random stats. But I would love to see stats generated based on a career that I've picked, right? So that's kind of more control than what I had before. So I'm going to kind of pull this down, and we'll talk about the next little control that I want to add in. The next control is a combo box. Let's add that in. So I'm going to drag a combo box into the scene. There it is, or onto the form scene. My mind is Unity now. And I want to call this combo box career. So combo box underscore career. So it's the career combo box. There are different ways to use a combo box. If I was to run this now, the combo box in its default form, if I run this, here it is, allows me to type stuff in here, okay? I don't want that to be the case. I don't want to be able to type in the combo box. I just want to pull down, the career that I want, okay? So I want to prototype this a little bit. And so what I want to do is, if you kind of go through down into the combo box itself, there are some options that you can allow the combo box to use, right? So for example, here, let's go through it. So anchor is where the anchor is. That's the top left corner of the box itself. The kind of cursor using the data source, if any. We'll talk about data sources later this semester. The drop mode. So the draw mode is normal. The drop down style. I want to change this drop down style. Instead of drop down, let's use drop down list. List, right? It's actually more of an array. But if I did this, and let's also go down to where it says items. Items is a collection, right? And if you click on items, there's a little ellipses here. Take a look at this ellipses. Does the array stay an array in the collection? Yes, it does. If I click on the ellipses, and if I type in some careers, what we had before, we had Army, Scion, we had Rogue, and let's use Telepath. Let's use 4 careers, okay? If I press OK on this now, if I press play, you can see that the career, I can select a career here from a list, right? Kind of similar to what we did with our console application, but instead of pressing 1, 2, 3, I can select it, okay? So this is good, and I want to grab this label, because I want the same style, and I want to put it up here. So I'm going to move this label up here, and this is going to be called the career, careers, as an example. So what I want to do is just make this the career label. So it's going to be called label career, label careers. There it is, label careers. And I can make my careers stretch if I want to, so it kind of fits this. It should say careers instead of primary attributes. So I can say careers. There we go. Or career list, maybe. Career list. A little different than I designed earlier. I can bring it closer, so that way you can drag and drop from or drop down your career list. Now, here's the behavior I want. When I select a career, it's going to fill the primary attributes with data, right? Fill my primary attributes with data. So what I've done is I've given you some preview of how this is going to work in ICE 8. So here in ICE 8, this is what I want to, kind of create. I made this, I call this select career. Let's do this together. Instead of career list, we'll call this select career. There it is, select career. And I also want to design an area with secondary attributes here. So let's do that. So what I want to do here is I want to copy this whole thing, copy, paste, and now I have 2 of these. Ooh, right? But I don't need all of these things, and these names have changed. So let's just get rid of the stuff I don't need. I don't need all of these. I only need 3 because I know my secondary attributes are awareness, toughness, and resolve. So we're going to say label AWA, right? And it's going to say AWA, AWA. And if it's too small, we can make the label slightly bigger. There we go. And this will be label TOU for toughness. And we'll call this toughness. And we'll do the same thing for label BGR. It's going to be changed to label RES for res or resolve, right? There we go. And this one will be text box. Again, you have to do this yourself anyway. Text box underscore AWA. This is text box underscore TOU. And this is text box underscore RES. Okay, so those are the 3. This one should not say primary attributes. This should be label underscore secondary attributes. And it should say that. So secondary attributes. Secondary. Right? And it should fill that label nicely. There we go. So we have this secondary attributes. I can make this smaller because I only need it to be like this big for secondary attributes. And I can also change the panel because my panel right now is called panel. And I don't want that. I should make it something more contextual. So panel secondary attributes. There we go. And these are all things I can access in code if I want to, right? So there we go. So I've got all this. And right now my random button doesn't do anything, but it'd be nice if when I generate my random stats, right, that my secondary attributes are also calculated. So I want to make a new function. And again, I've kind of given you the code for this right here. I'll come back to this in a second. But it is this function, which is compute secondary attributes. I'm going to take this right now. This is a you-do thing. But I'm going to give it to you right now anyway. And I'll put this in your chat there, the chat window. So I want to take this function and go back to here. Here, I'll be okay. And unity in the brain now. And just put this under here, right? So here's my, compute secondary attributes. And I want to call it, after I generate the button, my random button, let's just rename this thing so I can rename my event. I want to call it button random click. You can rename events to anything you want as long to make them, kind of appear the way you want them to. And what I want to do here is I want to call the compute secondary attributes method, which basically takes in awareness, toughness, and resolve, and does a conversion between, takes agility, converts the text that we find in the box, in the agility box, converts it to an integer, and does the same thing to perception, adds those things together, and then after it adds everything together, it converts it back to a string and stores it in the text attribute or the text property of awareness. So if I was to run this thing now, you're going to see that when I click random, not only do I get random, but I also get the secondary attributes calculating nicely. Okay, so this is pretty good. I think I want to put this up on GitHub, so I want to go to View Terminal, right? And I modified it by adding in secondary attributes. That's what I've done. And it's just a test. I've also added in my compute secondary attributes thing, and I've done it in a different order than you might see on your in-class exercise, but that's fine. So I'll say something like added secondary attributes to form. Okay, nice and easy. I've added secondary attributes, and it does these things. Again, you could have made many more commits here. I could have made a commit when I renamed some things. I could have made a commit when I, I move things around, and I added my select career thing as well. So I want to do this thing. I want another button. So instead of me, well, actually, right now I don't. When I pull this down, this interface, what I want to do is I want to, when it's selected, whatever is selected from here, I want to calculate what this is going to be. But I'd like to use an enum for this because we've talked about enums before. So back to this. So enums sit outside my class. This is my class for my game controller in Unity. Let's just close down this right now so I'm not confused. And I'm also going to close down Unity because it's I love Unity, but it's just I got Unity in my brain now, and I'm like, why am I doing Windows Forms when I can do Unity? Sorry, what I meant to do is go back here, and outside the class is where I'd want to put in my enum. So I'm going to say enum, and I want to call this enum career, right? We've done this before, and I want to add in those 4 careers. So the first thing is going to be Army, and then the next thing is going to be Scion, and then it's going to be Rogue, and finally Telepath. Remember we did this? So this is the career enum, right? Let's put that up on GitHub. So again, going back to view terminal, I'm going to say git add dot, git commit -m. Let's say added career enum. Go. So I've added my career enum, and this is pretty cool. What I want to do with this is in my constructor. So I want to talk about this a second. So this is the constructor function for selection form. So the constructor function in forms and in other classes, this triggers when my object is instantiated for the first time. So when my form is created for the first time, I call my constructor function. That's what I'm doing, okay? Similar to when I'm using Unity and the start function fires or triggers when I add a game object to the scene. It's the same thing here with the selection form constructor. It's got the same name as the class. And when you see this, you know that this is the constructor function, and this is the thing that's going to trigger when the object is created, okay? So in here is a great place to do stuff if I want to, set things up. But I want to set up a couple of things here, right? One of them is, this is really ugly code, all right? Like really ugly. I'm really like, kind of repeating myself over and over again. Wouldn't it be nice if, instead of it doing it like this, we did it in a different way? And again, I may have done some of your work for you, but let's think about this for a second. I would be nice if I made a list of text boxes, right? A text box list or an array of text boxes. You can do either one or the other, right? And imagine if the array or list of text boxes includes all of these, right? So I have some suggestions for you. So back to this. So here is some variable setup. I definitely want the random variable, which is cool. I want a list of careers at the top, and I want a list of career stats, and I want a text box array of primary stat text boxes and secondary stat text boxes. So let's take all these things. I'm going to copy them. This is right from the PowerPoint. I'm going to actually populate this. So here's the one part. This is the compute secondary attributes, and this is the other part, which I just said now. Okay. So I want to take this careers enum and all that stuff, and I'm going to put this way at the top underneath inside my class, as an example. So it's in my class. Career is outside my class because it's an enum, right? But I want to put my other stuff in here, right here. So this is where I want to put that stuff. So careers, get names. Here are my career stats, and I have 2 arrays. One is a text box, right, called primary text stat text boxes. The other one is another one called secondary stat text boxes. So the reason why I'm putting them up here is anything up here, these are considered class variables, right? And these class variables in here are usable throughout my entire form. Okay, that's one thing to note. They're usable everywhere. all right? As opposed to if I was to make some variables inside of my button random click, then they would live and die in this context, right? Because that's the, the context they live in. This is the scope of those variables, right? So I kind of want to do this up here. So they're in the scope, the class scope, so anything can be used. They're in this curly brace box as an example, okay? So now that I have this inside of my constructor, this is a great place to initialize some of the other things. So going back to this is what I'm doing here. In my constructor, I want to take all of this code. I'm going to copy this one and put it inside of here. But before I do that, of course, I want to make a commit for all this. So I'm going to say save all, view terminal, and I'm going to add in get commit -m. We'll say added class variables. Okay. Again, I could have hand bombed all this, but just for the sake of time, you've seen some of this stuff before. This is new. This is new, where I'm kind of just declaring an array, but I'm not defining how big it is. I'm not doing it here. I'm going to do that in here, and I want you to tell me why I should do it in here as opposed to up here. Why would I define my stat text boxes array as this in here as opposed to way out here? Does anyone know? Anybody? So this is how the form works, my friends, right? When the form is generated, the selection form constructor triggers, right? It calls the initialize component function. Let's go to definition for this one. The initialize component function is inside my designer, and it instantiates or creates all the objects on my form, okay? So before I try and make lists of things and whatever, right, the initialize component has to trigger, which means if I go back, use the back arrow here on the top left. If I go back, that means that I can't really allocate variables here because they would be empty. They don't even exist yet. The only time they exist is when the initialize component function triggers, right? So then after this triggers, this is where I want to set them up because I need them to be created. So first they get created, then I can set them up. Next, my combo box career items, instead of it being me typing it out like I did, so remember here I typed out a collection, right? So I went to items, the items collection, and I typed it out. I kind of did one of these, right? I don't want to type it out here. I want this to come from code because what if I add more collections later, more careers later? I want careers and stats and whatever, just like we did before. So I don't need this here. I can erase that, right? Instead, what I want is I want the selection form itself to get these careers from the careers array. Okay, so let me explain how this works again. This is a cascade of things here, right? So the first thing is I have a career enum. It has values, army, scion, rogue, and telepath, right? That's what we have. We use the enum, the helper class enum get names, just like we did before. That was week 6, if I'm not wrong. Week 6, a few weeks ago, or almost a month ago now. We used get names, and what it does is it takes the career enum, this career enum right here, and converts all of these into strings. So careers, this string array, careers, has all of these in string form, okay? Back down to this. So I use my combo box career, items, because it's a list, going back to lists today, I can use the clear method of this to erase all the items, just in case there was some item there before. When I start the form up for the first time, it'll clean it up. It'll take care of it, right? And then I can use a special function that belongs to lists called add range. What add range does is it takes something like an array, so the careers string array, and it adds everything inside of that array to my items. So what this does is it populates the combo box with everything inside of the careers string array. The career string array came from my career enum, right? So if I add something here, it adds something here, okay? And that's what I did here. I also came up with some stats for you, just like we did before. So instead of you having to make your own or whatever, they're right here. Career stats. We're going to get back into this in a second. But then the next thing is that my primary stat text boxes, I wanted to make two arrays, right? Instead of me doing something ugly like this, I don't want to do this ugly stuff anymore. I want to be able to loop through each text box inside of my primary stat text boxes array and do the roll 5d10 toString, okay, or whatever I'm going to do. I'm going to do another thing, okay? So let's do this. So instead of doing it like this, now, my button random click, I want to do the following thing. I want to do a for each loop, right? And I want to say, I'm going to use var because I don't know the type. For every text box, so for every, text box, we'll say, text box, or let's call it stats. For every stat in the primary stat text boxes, for every stat and for every one of those ones, right? What I want to do is I want to say that the stat, right, dot text is equal to roll 5d10 toString. And so now this is a much better way of allocating random values to each stat as opposed to listing them all off and doing them individually. Why? What if I want to have more stats in the future, right? Then this would take care of it because I'm basically looping through each stat. I'm using var here because I didn't know what I wanted to make this. I could explicitly say text box. So for every stat text box, that's what it is, in primary stat text boxes, all of these that I've listed manually here, one at a time. I could have done this automatically too, by the way. I have these. This is pretty cool, right? So let's see if this works. So if I was to do this and if I press play, right, then the random number does that, right? So I can kind of click random and it still works, just like I did before. But also, if I click on army, what I want this to do is I want this to populate whatever the stat box. Notice that these now come up. The select career is working. So what I want to do is put that up on GitHub. So I'm going to go view, terminal. I'm going to say git add dot, git commit -m, and we'll say added career combo box to form, which is what I kind of did. It's okay. You're not that far behind because it's all in the PowerPoint. Okay. So, so this is what I've done so far. So again, let's go over this one more time. So enum, I made a career enum. From there, I made some class variables, right? The class variables are available anywhere in the class, anywhere in this container, right? Call the class, right? Absolutely, you can totally get it done. Yes, you have to rename everything for sure, Zach. But you can also rename my stuff instead of renaming your stuff, right? Inside my select form constructor function, this is the constructor function, then I have these two arrays that I've now defined or initialized what these are. So this is, initialize text box arrays. That's what this is. That's what I'm doing here, right? So I've initialized this array, and this is going to be initialize the primary stats text box array, okay? And this is where I'm initializing the secondary stat text box array right here. So I'm initializing. Here I'm declaring. So this is declaring the text box arrays, right? For easier access, I don't like that. Declare text box, the primary stat text box array, primary stat text box array. And this is I'm also declaring the secondary stat text box array. So declaring here, but initializing here inside of my selection form constructor function, all right? So that's the two things that I'm doing. All right. Career stats sets this up, but I've not used this yet. Okay. I've not used the career stats yet. The only way I can use it is I have to respond to this event. Remember this, there's an event that's triggering here that I'm not listening for, right? The event that's random, I'm listening for. When I click on the button, it triggers the click event, right? I need to respond to another type of event, which is the selection changed event for here. I haven't done that yet. To do this, there's two ways. Remember, I could double click on my drop down, my combo box. So if I double click on here, it'll generate that event, right? Or if you see here, I can just double click here on selected index changed, and it'll do the same thing. So if I double click here, then it'll create the event, right? If it doesn't create the event for you, it'll list it inside of your selection form designer. So here's my event inside of here, right there. It's called combo box career selected index change. That's what the event is going to be called. I want to make this inside of my selection form. So I have, let's just collapse some of this stuff. The great thing is you can collapse any of these areas down to make them, smaller to look at. So we don't have to always look at everything by using these little arrows here, these collapse things. Don't collapse everything because you can't see everything, but here I can collapse the career, the enum. I can collapse them down to make them more manageable. I can even collapse stuff that I'm not using right now, or like this, okay? And like that. So I want to make a brand new event, right, that I want to add in, and it's going to be the same signature that I have here. So I'm going to do, well, almost, except for the name, right? So I'm going to call this private void, the name of the event, followed by object sender, and then event args E, right? And what this will do is when I pull down the combo box, when I actually select the item, I want to do something with it. So my selected index changed. How do I do this? Back to my friend over here. So here it is where it is. I want to take this code right here. Here it is. I'm going to put that in the chat for you guys so you can see it. And I want to take this code and plop it into this combo box right here. And I want to explain what this does. So it does one of these. It says, okay, well, if my combo box career selected index is less than 0, and we'll come back to that in a second, then I want to return. So if somehow my combo box career index is cleared, right? That's what this is, and I'll annotate this. If the combo box has been cleared, right? Then I want to return. Then return. Return means leave this method. Don't do anything. Okay? Don't do the rest of the stuff. However, if it's not cleared, then I want to use a for loop, and I named the counter attribute. That's what I named it. You could have called this index or count. It doesn't really matter. I just named it attribute because I like that, right? So for attribute starts at 0, where attribute is less than the primary stat text box's length. So primary stat text boxes, we know that there are 6 right now. So where it's less than 6, then what do I want to do? Increment attribute by 1 at the end of the loop. Now what I'm going to say is go to my primary stat text boxes, and I just want to show you the selection form again. Primary stat text box is here. That's what it goes through, and it goes through each one of these things. This is 0, this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5. These in order. This is where they're stored in memory, contiguous memory. And then I want to say primary stat text box is attribute, which means 0, the first one, the 0th one. Take that text value and take my career stats. Now this is where the career stats comes in, which is up here. Here's my career stats. And my career stats is a 2-dimensional array. I'm doing this again to you guys so you guys get it. My 2-dimensional array. The first box is the house on the street. This is the house on the street, or the row, right? The second box is the room in the house, right? Which is these things in here, all right? Those are the rooms in the houses, right? With values, right? So going back down here, the first square, the first square brackets, this part right here, is the the a house on the street. So I'm saying, hey, get the combo box career, the career combo box, and whatever the selected index is. Okay, so selected index means that when I pull down the career combo box, there's going to be some items that are in there, right? They are zero base counting. So it's going to start 0, 1, 2, 3, which means if I go back to here, that when the army comes up, it'll be selection 0. Scion will be selection 1, rogue will be selection 2, and so on, right? So back down to here, what I'm saying is whatever the selected index is, that's the house on the street. That's the stat line that I want, okay? Whatever I've selected, okay? And then I want to use the attribute, that's the room in the house. I want to use the attribute array to go through each one of these attributes and allocate them one at a time to each of the primary stat boxes text. That's what this does. So this little loop here does everything. Now I could make this simpler, right? I can break this down into a number of different lines, but it kind of does the same thing. Let's try this out and see if it works. So if I worked now, instead of randomly generating it, I can just pull down a career, click army, and all of a sudden, poof, it's there, which is exactly the functionality we had last time in console, right? Last time we did this with console, and as an example, and now we we can do this here in Windows Forms like this. See? On top of that, I can click random and also randomize my stats. But this is kind of weird because it says telepath up here. Not quite right. But we're getting closer to what we want, right? So, okay, this is great. So I've got the career stats working. And what I've done is I've added in my combo career select box. I can actually take this exact commit now and I can put that in. So I can say something like view terminal, and I can say get add dot, get commit -m, and put that in, and get push. So far, so good. Next, right? Again, I've done some stuff for you, and that's okay, right? Because we've kind of got up to here. I'm going to leave the rest of the pieces for you to do on your own, because it gives you basically directions on how to do each of these other things that I want to do. The one thing though that I do want to do is parts that are mine that I haven't finished. So I want to finish the user interface for this. I'm going to do that in a second. And I also want to put in this roll 6d10 drop lowest method instead of the 5d10, okay? Because I want a better stat. And Damien mentioned last time that my stats are poor, that I'm bad, right? Damien says too random. He doesn't like that. So Damien, just for you, I want to put in this roll 6d10 drop lowest, and that's what I did this. So here we go. So I'm going to take this, drop lowest, and I want to do all of this inside of my code. Again, I'm going to copy paste this so you can see it. There we go. That's the one I want to add in. And I want to add this into the bottom of my code. So again, going back to Visual Studio. I want to go back in here, and where I have my roll 5d10, just underneath that, I'm going to put in roll 6d10 drop lowest, and I want to replace, this is the beautiful thing now with my random stuff, I want to replace this with this. So let's try this out. So here's my drop lowest. I'm just going to replace these two things. So now I'm using this instead. So I want to say something like my comments here is going to be deprecated, right? Rolls 5d10 and kind of returns total, but I don't use this anymore. I'm using this, right? Which is, rolls 6d10, drops the lowest die, and returns the total of the remaining dice, which is a much better bell curve than than what I had done before. So now if I press play and run this thing, I can see that my stats, my random stats are like a way better average than what they were before, right? Again, Damien, just for you, buddy, right? So, and so they become actually sometimes better than the stats I pulled down from my career. Like for example, Army doesn't have any 40s, right? So that's pretty good. All right, this is pretty good. I've got that, and let's put this up on GitHub. So view, terminal, and just like I did before, I'm going to grab this part right here and kind of go into this. So git commits, git add dot actually, git commits -m, and did that, git push. There we go. So I added that in. I'm here. I did this already. We did this already, and we did this already. So all of these things have been done for you, but I want you to set up the rest of it. So there's number 7, which we kind of did together, number 8, which we kind of did together, a couple of GIFs, right? You set up the button reset click, right? You set up the button random click. I kind of have some of this, but I want you to change the button random click so it works like this, right? So no problem. And there's this other show random check changed checkbox, right? Which is the random or not random. I'll talk about this in a second when we set things up, as well as the application exit, which leaves the application. So that's all for you to do and to figure out. It's not that bad. It just literally won't take that long. But we want to develop this interface. So do 2 selection options. There's only 1 selection. So the selection option is just this, the career selection. But I want to finish off this. So now let's talk about some additional controls. So far we've talked about combo box. Combo box allows us to have a few objects in there. We have items, the selected index, the selected item. Not yet. No, it doesn't get used. Probably next week. You got it. Selected index, selected item, text, drop down style, all those things we monkeyed with already, right? And so on. And these are the properties of the combo box, which is pretty cool. The event that we cared about is the selected index changed event. This one right here. This event is the one that we're using right now. And it triggers when the user changes the selection. Okay, that's what it does. Checkbox. I want to kind of put this checkbox in play too. Show random button. All right, so let's put that in. So to put a checkbox in, let's drag it in. So here's my checkbox. I'm going to put it up here, right? And so again, I want to name it properly. So I want to go here, and this is checkbox show random button, right? And I'm going to go down here and change this to show random button. And you can make it selected or not. By default, I'm going to leave it checked. So there is a checked state, which I'm going to leave as true. There it is. Check state is true. And the idea here that I want you to work with is when this is unchecked, the random button will be hidden. That's what it's going to be hidden. Okay. So that's what I want this to do. For now, that's your functionality to figure out. I've put in the checkbox. Just to note, checkboxes, there is a checked property. It's either true or false. And the event that you want to trigger is the checked changed event. The checked changed event, just wait around, Zach, and I'll fix it. I'll fix it with you. The checked changed event triggers when the checkbox is on or off. It's really like, a checkbox is like a switch. I turn it on or I turn it off. Where it's really great is for things like settings or preferences. I want to turn certain things on and I want to turn certain things off. Okay, that's what checkboxes are. Radio button, let's add that in. But before we do that, we've added a checkbox. Well, let's finish the user interface because we're going to run out of time if I don't do that. Radio button, I want to add in a radio button as well. Radio buttons give me one selection out of a bunch of options. So here's some options for species. Here I've got the species group box. I'm going to talk about this in a second. And this group box kind of groups together these radio buttons. So radio buttons are individual. So if I take a radio button here and I put it in, here's my radio button. And let's suppose this radio button is the radio button human, right? And then I can say something like human as an option, okay? So radio button human, I can also select the checked state, if it's checked or not. I will check it in a second. But in order for me to select from a group of radio buttons, I need to use a group box container. So here's the group box container. I'll talk about that next. I'll take the group box container, and then what I want to do is I want to wrap this around, or put the checkbox inside the group box container. So I want to take this radio button and put it inside the group box, okay? So just like I have my panel, it's a group box is similar to a panel, but the difference between a group box and a panel is it has a little, kind of a border that's just very slight. And then the top left corner has, but if you want to use it or not, a text property. So notice that it says species here. We can change that. So we go to the text property of the group box. Instead of it saying group box 1, we can say species. And I can control, if I change the font of my group box, everything inside of it, including the human radio button, also changes. So let's make this control. I can click onto it and I can control the entire font in this case. So 12, I want to make it 12. I want to make it bold. And I also want to make it Calibri because that's what I like. You can make it something else. If you want to be creative, you can. But if I do that, human changes as well. I just don't want my human radio button to be bold. So I can specifically go back to the human radio button and turn the bold off to false, like this. So there's my species radio button. Let's rename this thing. So it should be called group box species. Group box species. Okay. And then I can copy paste this a couple times. So copy, paste, right? And then copy, paste. And instead of it being human, 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 let's give myself some space here. So I can kind of open this up just a touch, make this maybe as big as this from a user interface perspective so they don't look completely off, right? And this one will be my robot radio button. So radio button underscore robot, right? And I can rename this to, or the text I can change to robot. And this one will be my radio button underscore alien, right? And I can go down and change this to alien. Now, by default, what I want is for human to be selected in this box. So I'm going to say human. I'm going to go back to human, and I'm going to go all the way up to checked, and I'm going to choose true. So by default, human will be selected. How does this work? If I press play, then you're going to see that human is selected, and because human, robot, and alien radio buttons are inside a group box, they're grouped together, which is kind of a cool thing. That means if I click one, the other one is unchecked automatically. This is automatic behavior. There's nothing for you to do. This is something that it can do, right? And this is kind of another really cool little option. So again, radio buttons, really great. Select one option of a series of options, right? Whereas checkboxes, you can have a series of checkboxes and you can decide to choose one or a series of them all at the same time, right? And a bunch of selection options. All right, so that's pretty cool. All right, getting closer to our user interface. That's radio buttons. Group boxes, we just use a group box. So a group box is a container similar to a panel, right? And one thing is they're really great that they work nicely with radio buttons. That's what they're really for. When you put radio buttons in a group box, they all are a collection together, a collection of controls. Notice that controls, right, is a property that basically lists all the controls inside the group box. This is really useful. So for example, if I go controls, which is a list, 0, it means the first control that's been added to the group box. Let me show you what this means. If I go back to my form, and here you can see in my outliner, I'm just going to just collapse the stuff I don't care about. Here's my group box, and notice that alien, robot, and human are listed in this order. I can move them around, right? So I can move this thing to the top. So if I want human to be the first one, and then I want robot, I can rearrange the order inside of my outliner. And by the way, the group box keeps track of all this stuff as controls. I can loop through them 0, 1, 2. Kind of really useful for looping through. Okay? Just going to make this form a little bit narrower, kind of like how I had in my example. I want two more things. We talked about panel. Panels kind of are like group boxes, but they don't have, they also have controls. I can also look through all the controls inside my panel. They're like basically sub-objects inside of my panel. I can look through them all. They do support auto scroll. So if you make a panel very, very long, right, you can actually have a scroll bar in there. You can turn the scroll bar on or off. Okay. You can also enable or disable controls inside of the panel if you want to. So if you want a panel to be disabled, and then the only way it's enabled if you press a box or checkbox as an example, you can do that. Last but not least is my lonely message box. And I kind of put the examples here for you to understand how this works. A message box pops up as a pop-up that comes up. And we've seen these in the web, if you ever did any web programming before, where you can have a little pop-up message to come up. It's actually better in many ways when it comes to interacting with the user. You want to alert the user that something is wrong, right? The dialogue result allows you to store the, whatever the response from the user is. But message box is a special construct. I'm just going to type it here so I can show you what this looks like. So suppose that I wanted to, I'm not going to do this, but let's suppose I wanted to use when I choose my button random click, I want, before I continue, some kind of construct like that. I want to say, we'll say random stats, the random button, or randomization. Randomization is destructive, right? Destructive. Are you sure, right? So confirm random generation. Actually, I'll say random generation is destructive. I probably put in there, if I'm not wrong. Random generation is destructive. Are you sure, right? That's a little message box that's going to come up, right? So show has 20 overloads. So there's 20 overloaded functions for the show option, right? 20 overloads. This overload takes in the string, which is the text, the caption, the message box buttons, and the message box icon. This is the overload that I'm using, right? The message box buttons is an enum. And what you can do is you can select different combinations of buttons. Abort, retry, ignore. That might be something. Cancel, try, continue. OK by itself. OK, cancel. Retry, cancel. Yes, no, or yes, no, cancel. Right? So those are all the different kinds of buttons. I want to press OK, cancel. All right? Message box icon is the icon that'll pop up when that happens. So you can say something like the message box icon is an asterisk, right? Or an error, exclamation, a hand, right? Information, which is like an I, a question mark, stop, and a warning. I want to use warning. And the warning also comes with a sound. So if I was to do this, press play, and it'll stop me from doing the random until I say, okay, watch. If I say random, it's going to say, are you sure? Random generation is destructive, are you sure? Right? It doesn't generate anything yet. And if I press OK, it's going to go ahead and do it. Okay? Otherwise, if I press random and it says, are you sure? If I press cancel, it shouldn't do anything else, right? But the problem is I'm not really checking for what it's doing. So messagebox.show by itself returns a dialog result. And this is where I have this dialog result part. Let's put that in there. So if I go here and I put this in, so result now captures the user, whatever they do. And you can actually kind of do an if statement here. You can say something like, if, result is equal to dialog result OK, right? So only when they say OK, then then do all this. I put all this inside of this conditional statement. So it's only going to do the randomized button if and only if the user pressed OK. Okay. So save. Let's try that again. So if I run this again, you can see that I press random and it says, are you sure it's destructive? Because it's going to just wipe things out. And if I press cancel, nothing happens. But if I press it again and press OK, now it works. Right? So pretty cool. All right, so that is your random button. I want to add in 2 more buttons to complete my part of the thing. I've done more than my part, but I'll do it anyway. Here's the random. I want to copy paste this button because it has some things in it that I want. Here it is. And this one, I'm going to kind of go with I'm going to adhere with the style that I had here. So back to in-class exercise 8, I want this kind of orange color, right? So the way I can get that is I can go to back color. Again, if you don't like my style and you want to do something different, as long as it looks cool, I'm good. You can see that there is no orange color, but you can choose web as an option. And I'm going to choose kind of like this orange color for this. So it's kind of like it's a warning color kind of, right? You can also make your own colors if you want. And instead of it being random, this is the cancel button, right? Or this is the reset button I'm going to use. So this is called button underscore reset. And it's going to reset the stats if you click on it. That's what I want it to do, reset, okay? So that's what this is going to be. Random is going to be in the middle, right? It'll be blue. And submit, which is another button I want to create. Let's copy paste that one. So there's the submit button. Okay, there's a submit button. I'll just call this submit button or button submit. Button submit. There it is. And let's change the color to green. So web, I want to move towards a green color, something like forest green. And then maybe change the foreground color to, instead of control text, we'll call it button highlight. So it's white. I'll also change this one, instead of like this weird blue, which some of you don't like, I'll change it from active caption to a darker blue, like hot track. And I'll change the foreground color to white again, right? So it's a little bit nicer. So there is my options here. And now you can see that I have a few buttons that I've put into play. Here's my button random. We can move this up. So I can move this kind of up the control. So I can group my controls in my selection form together. So there's button submit, button reset, button random. I like to make it so that button random is in the middle and button submit is after everything else, just like the order, reset, random. And instead of reset, they should say submit. There we go. And what I want to do with these 3 things is space them out nicely, so I can just select them all and just use the spacing to make sure that these are all spaced out nicely. And there you go. There's my version of thing. Now there's one thing that I'm missing, and it's also the name. So I'm going to move this all down a little bit, right, which you can do. And notice that there is a enter name text box. So you can do that. So if I grab in the text box, here's the text box, and I'm going to kind of bring it in. But instead of having a label, there's another way you can do the labels here for the text box. Let's make it bigger. Let's make it so that the text box has all the things I like in a text box, which are the border style is going to be fixed single. And I also want to make it so that the font, let's select the font family again. It's going to be 12, and it's going to be Calibri, just like before. There it is. And that's what I want to make this, right? I can make it bold as well if I really want to. There we go. So it changes the shape of my text box. This is going to be the name text box. So text box name. There we go. And I want to give placeholder text. Placeholder text, if you've ever done, you know, kind of any web programming, is the text that comes up that tells you what to do, that gets replaced when you type in there. So notice that there is a placeholder text property for text boxes. So if I go in here and I can say something like, enter your name, right? Then enter your name is going to be in the text box right there. Text align is left right now because that's how you should enter your name. And if I was to press play now, we'll see the full effect of my little design. So here's enter your name, and I can type in Tom. I can pull down my stats, as an example. If I want to randomize it, it's going to ask me, are you sure? And I'll press yes. And then it'll randomize my stats. It'll do something else later on for you. I could say I'm an alien. And then if I press submit, I want it to close down the form. Okay. So one more thing about forms. So I'm going to look at the form now itself. The form, and we haven't really talked about this too much, has some default actions that you can do. One of them, if you scroll down, is the default cancel button. Okay, so if you want to assign a button that cancels the form, so it stops the form from executing, you can assign that button to the cancel button. Okay, I'm going to scroll down here. Other things that the form has is the submit button, or the accept button is what it's called, on the top. So if you look at the accept button, there's none. You could pull down the accept button. Okay, so I'm going to use my submit button submit, as the accept button. Okay, what does this do? When I pressed enter ever on the entire form, right, and I'm not selecting something else, I just press enter, it's going to submit the form. So a good example is, that's not going to do anything yet, but if I do this, and if there was an action to submit the form, I could actually listen for that submission, the form submission. But if I clicked submit, it's actually going to submit the form. Or if I press enter, it's also would submit the form. I'm not listening for that right now, so it's not going to do anything. But in the future, we may do something with that. All right, so that's the one thing we're going to change in the form. The other thing that you can change is, I don't like the maximize thing to work, because it's going to break my layout, right? Because it's like really big, and I don't even know what I'm doing this, like why it's so big, right? Minimize is okay, right? That's okay. I minimize and I can kind of bring it up, but maximize, that doesn't make any sense to me. So let's get rid of it. So I can go to here, and then inside of maximize box for the form itself, I can turn it to false. So now maximize does not function anymore in my form. And if I press play, you're going to see that I can't maximize. It's grayed out. Okay. If I really want to be a stickler, I can also limit my form to a certain size, so you can't resize the form. Okay. So one thing to note is, if you go through this, you can see that there's auto scroll and auto scale mode and allow drop and a bunch of stuff. There's also auto size is false, right? And that's good, because otherwise it would size to the size of my stuff, to my form. But you can also change the minimum size and the maximum size, right? So maximum size right now is 0. That means you can maximize to whatever size you want. But I can limit this, because right now my size is 768 by 865, right? You can make these numbers a little rounder. So let's say something like, 800 by 900. Let's make that happen. So if I said something like 800 by 900, right? And I can realign everything just so that way it works with my form. So just kind of something like this in the middle. So it's kind of like not completely too much white space, probably still too much white space, but whatever. And then what I want to do is save everything. So save my form. So 800, we know my form now has a very specific size, 800 by 900. So what I can do is I can say that the maximum size is 800 by 900. So 800 by 900. Now what this is going to do, if I do that, is 800 by 900, right? It's going to limit me when I'm kind of resizing. So if I start off, and if I try and resize my form, I can't. Look, I can't resize my form, right? This is one way of doing it, right? I can make it smaller though. I can do one of these, but I can't resize it larger. If I don't want to go any smaller, like I want it to always stay the same, so non-resizable as an example, then again, what I want to do is on the form, the minimum size could be the same, 800 by 900. And if you did that 800 by 900 for the maximum and minimum size, then if I go to play, you're going to see that there is no way that I can resize the form. So there you go. So now even if I tried to do it, it's going to stay the same size. So that's another thing. Last thing, the size grip style is another thing that I can do to save myself some time. It says auto, right? And I can say hide, right? So hide means that if I press play, it won't even allow me to, it won't even give me that option. So it doesn't show me the, the size grip style anymore that I want. Well, actually it does, but let's try that again. Size grip style. It should basically not even show me what that looks like. Okay, let's put back to auto. Other things, start position is window default location. You could do a manual start. So if I want the manual position to be in a certain place, then I could select where it's going to go, right, based on X and Y coordinates. So that start position is manual, right? So I could select this. I could also say center of the screen. So if I did that, then whatever your screen size is, it's going to go right in the center of your screen now, right here, every single time, instead of top left corner. That's Windows default, okay? So that's something you can monkey around with the actual window, the form itself, which is pretty cool, okay? And there are many other options that you can monkey around with, play around, so that way you can, kind of look at stuff. You can also look at other things, like add descriptions for the form for accessibility purposes, add in a context menu, which we'll do later on, and a bunch of other stuff. The icon you can change. So right now the icon is this, but you can change the icon to be your own. We'll do that later on as well, and a bunch of other stuff. All right, this is a great place to put this up on GitHub. I finished my user interface, right? So I'm going to say File, Save All, and I'm going to go View, Terminal, and I'm going to just do git a dot, git commit -m, and we'll say completed user interface. Git push. Oop, git push. So that's it for me for today. Questions around anything we talked about at all? I know it's a lot, again, but first aid git. Okay. Can you continue with my repo for I8? No, I'd like you to do it on your own. All right, please don't. I'm going to put it up now, the video, right? Yeah, make it on your own. I don't want you to just use mine. That's not good practice, because then what's going to happen is during the exam, you're going to be like lost, right? So I want you to practice on your own. This is what practicing is all about, like doing it, looking at the controls and stuff. Anyone else have any questions? All right, my friends, I'm going to stop recording this one and I'll put it up now, and hopefully that'll help you get in-class exercise 8 completed by tonight at midnight. All right, thank you so much, and I'll see you in person next week. I'll stop recording now.